Hi, everyone. My name is Sampada Kukade, and I'm the Vice President of External Relations and Development at Skills for Change. I would like to start this conversation with a land acknowledgement. And so we begin acknowledging that we are gathered on the traditional territories of the Indigenous people who have been original stewards of this land since time immemorial. In Toronto, this includes the lands of the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, the Huron-Wendat, and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, covered by Treaty 13 and the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement rooted in shared responsibility, care, and accountability to one another and to the land. And today's acknowledgement is not just about the physical territory, but it's also about the knowledge territory. Indigenous peoples hold strong systems of governance, ethics, and relational accountability that have sustained communities across generations. So, as we speak about AI and engage with AI today, technologies that increasingly technologies that increasingly shape decisions, labor, governance, and daily life. We recognize that these systems are built on lands, data, and worldviews that are rarely indigenous by design. So we acknowledge that the ongoing impacts of colonization, including extraction of indigenous knowledge, data, and labor without consent. And we commit to approaching this with work with humility, respect, and responsibility. So artificial intelligence is often framed as neutral, inevitable, and universal. And again, Indigenous teachings remind us that no system is neutral, that every tool reflects the values, power structures, and relationships embedded in its creation. So from this perspective, AI must be understood not merely as a technology, but a relational system, one that affects people, communities, lands, and future generations. And we're at a moment right now where artificial intelligence is no longer a future conversation. It's already reshaping how we work, how we deliver services, and how communities access opportunities. And yet, across the nonprofit and community sector, there is still a critical question in front of us. Will we be passive recipients of the change or active leaders in shaping it? What makes this conversation especially important is that AI is not just a technology shift, it is a human one. It will influence who has access to opportunity, whose skills are valued, and ultimately who gets left behind if we're not intentional. And that's why today's conversation is grounded in key ideas, including advancing responsible AI, elevating human capabilities, and ensuring equity is at the center of how AI is adopted and scaled. So, on that note, I am incredibly pleased to be joined by Zabeen Hirji, a leader who has consistently championed inclusive leadership and workforce transformation. Zabeen is an executive advisor, board director, and thought leader on leadership, culture, and the future of work, and AI and human elevation and skills. She is the former Chief Human Resources Officer at RBC, where she served for 10 years overseeing 80,000 employees globally and was a member of the Group Executive Committee. Currently an executive advisor at Deloitte, Canada, Zabeen also advises governments and nonprofits and is the founder of the Purposeful Third Act movement and has been recognized with honors, including the Order of Ontario. So together today, we will explore what it means for nonprofits to not only adopt AI, but to lead with it while engaging the corporate sector and influencing responsible leadership and building capacity for our sector needs to ensure no one is left behind. So thank you, Zabeen, for joining me today. I'm so thrilled about this conversation. We've been doing a lot of work together over the last several months, and the conversation is really centered around the sector capacity and ensuring the sector is ready and prepared for the AI economy. So I wanted to start first around setting the context around human-centered AI. So in Canada, we're seeing a growing investment and momentum in AI, but at the same time, adoption, especially organizations and the overall workforce, still lags behind a lot of other global leaders. And there's a real gap between technological advancement and how people and institutions are actually integrating AI into their day-to-day work. So in that context, please welcome. And I want to explore a little bit about how you define human capabilities in relation to AI and why it's so critical that we center these capabilities as adoption accelerates.
Great. Well, Sampada, thank you so much for inviting me It's always a delight to be doing something with Skills for Change and for you, and also to engage with people from across the not-for-profit sector. And I think we have some folks from the corporate sector as well. And of course, I love this question, the question of elevating human capabilities, which in a world of AI, really where we're at is more human, not less. And let me talk a little bit about what I mean by human capabilities. As I think about it, they really are the things that make us uniquely human in how we work, how we think, how we make decisions, and involves things like judgment, navigating through ambiguity, where there's no clear path, there's no clear answer. It's something that we have through our lived experiences developed that capacity for.
Mhm.
And of course, to contextualize it, because yes, it's about facts, yes, it's about having the data, but it's about bringing the human element that really cannot be turned into data. It's based on other people's experiences, our own experiences, and thinking in that human-centric way. So let me get specific about some of the skills and some of those capabilities that do make us uniquely human and that are so important as we collaborate with, engage with AI in a complementary way.
Mhm.
The one I think that tends to rise to the top is critical thinking.
Yes.
And I'm sure we'll come back to this, but your positioning up front that really speaks to the importance of being thoughtful. And as I think about AI, just because we could do something doesn't mean we should. The technology answers the could question.
Mhm.
Human, the thinking, the judgment makes that decision about should we use that. And critical thinking really helps you to get to that, to ask the questions that make sure you get different perspectives. So when I'm using Gen AI myself, I will ask for, give me a contrarian view. What am I missing here?
Right.
Who might be left out?
Mhm.
Those are things, whether at an individual level or at a level of developing tools and processes, are really important to include. And again, I know we'll come back to that. A creativity is another piece. And increasingly, the way we differentiate ourselves is through
Mhm.
that creativity. And uh, paired with empathy, where you're putting yourself in the shoes of whether it's people that you're supporting, whether it's funders, whether it's partners. We really the empathy there allows you to then be creative in an aligned way. And what's I find really interesting here is we often think of empathy as the soft stuff. Well, the soft stuff is the hard stuff, but what I go back to is the CEO of Microsoft, who has said for a number of years that the most important skill at Microsoft is empathy, because
Mhm.
empathy allows us to serve our customers and their changing needs. And I think that was very wise of Satya Nadella, the CEO, to frame it in that way. And this goes back probably 5 years. So it is very much, a key business skill. Um, and the other thing that I would say here that where human skills really matter is we have this risk of speed over trust.
Mhm.
And really what we're aiming for is speed and trust and
Right.
this world of ands. And again, that's where human capability comes into play.
Thank you for that. And I couldn't agree more. And especially when we look at the nonprofit sector in particular, and organizations, including the work that Skills for Change does, when we look at how we're using the AI and how much evidence there is and research there is around the inherent biases and inequities that AI brings, the tools. And so it is that much more important, as you mentioned, that we use critical thinking skills and we use empathy as we train, particularly clients who come from communities such as newcomer communities or underserved communities, how to use the AI and how to interpret the AI so that they're getting the most effective use of it for them, and understanding where the limitations are. And to that note, there is a growing conversation about responsible AI and ensuring AI systems are designed and used in that ethical and transparent and accountable way, and do not reinforce bias and inequity. But from your perspective, what does that responsible AI actually look like in practice, especially when we think about equity?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think your framing is really important as a place to start. There are risks and benefits, like with many things, like with many technologies in the past. What is different with AI is just the speed at which adoption is happening, and the pervasiveness. It's everywhere. We are using it without being aware that we're using it. We're using it right now. It's probably making me look better than I really look through the built-in refinements here. And so understanding the bias and inequity risks, and just to provide a really practical example, there are recruiting systems that use AI to reduce bias, and
Hmm.
those are organizations that I support. And there are organizations where there's actually more bias being created, and there have been some cases even in the US around that, because the training data that's being used to define what a successful hire is
Hmm.
actually based on a population that has underrepresentation of many groups,
Right.
and so the desired outcome is biased,
Hmm.
and so it's really important there for organizations who are building that kind of capability to actually ensure that they are using the desired population outcome along with the skills, that their teams, their development teams, are diverse so that they think about certain things that come from lived experience. And it's really important for the consumer or the buyer to ask those questions. Help me understand how you've built your algorithms. Help me understand how you keep your data, your training data current, and what you're learning and how you're making adjustments. There's, of course, also the whole area of data privacy and security concerns. Much of that is at the organizational level, and I hope we have a chance to talk about what Skills for Change has done around the governance, your governance policy, but also as individuals. It's really important for us to understand, and that's where it's important for organizations to actually start to use AI, because otherwise people are going to use it on their own laptops, on their own phones. We
Right.
will do things to make things more productive and easier for us. And that creates a whole host of data issues.
Mhm.
Lack of transparency, you've mentioned that. You should be able to explain to people how you got to a certain outcome.
Yeah.
Recruiting is an example. Credit approval is another example where you really want it to have that clarity. And so, back to your sort of question of responsible AI and practicality. Hopefully, as I've outlined the risks, I've covered that off. But one data point that I just saw, and I'm sure you've seen the study that Imagine Canada did on the use of AI by not-for-profits, and it was released this year, but even the research period was the third quarter of last year, so quite current. And I think the data said that only 10% of not-for-profits have governance policies,
Right.
and about 20% were developing them, and the balance, 65% or so, uh, didn't even have that on their radar screen. And the way I think about governance, though, sometimes it falls too much into we want to mitigate all risks. It's really about getting clear on what the real risks are
Mhm.
and then creating that framework, but also giving people freedom within a framework and seeing that as an enabler so people aren't worrying about, oh, can I do this? Is this,
Yes.
does this going to create any issues? And for me, good governance has always been about that. Be really clear on the non-negotiables
Right.
and then set it up so that people go, oh, okay, these are the things that we can experiment with.
Absolutely. And folks, before we move on, we have enabled the chat. So I know for Zabeen and I, it was really important. And thank you, Ajay, for doing that. Important for you all to engage in the conversation. We want to hear your thoughts, where you're coming in from, and maybe what you're interested in hearing from us. And we do want the opportunity for folks to engage in asking questions during this chat. So please feel free to use the chat. Please, we do encourage you to do so. Just moving back to this conversation, Zabeen, and I know we'll get into a little bit about that governance piece, and but what I'm interested in when you talk about the nonprofit sector, there seems to be, and with the Imagine Canada report, and just to hear around the governance being so low in terms of organizations that are even thinking about this at this stage, a lot of nonprofits, there seems to be an inherent fear, and I completely understand that, especially considering the geopolitical landscape. Like there is so much at risk right now with the nonprofit sector. There's funding risk, there's risk overall in terms of particular areas of nonprofit sector completely getting eliminated. So I understand the overall fear of what's happening across the globe. And that then the AI piece adds to that in terms of that fear. And it's kind of like, oh, another area that our jobs are going to be taken away from us, et cetera. And so when we talk about that responsible AI and figuring out where the nonprofit sector fits in the AI landscape, why is it so important that our sector not only adopts these tools, but actively participates in shaping the broader AI conversation?
Yeah, that is a brilliant question, and one that I'm just starting to see emerge. It for nonprofits and even for funders that are really looking to ensure that the voices of everyone, the needs of everyone, that we are in fact building inclusive prosperity. So important. So let me think about what some of those. I think you framed why it's important because I think you started off with really referencing the what we have to learn from the Indigenous communities and the importance of the journey to reconciliation. And I think one of the principles is nothing about us without us. And
Mm.
that applies, it is something that I think we can adopt for other groups. And so how can the nonprofit organizations play a role? So practically, and I'd love to hear your experience and when you're dealing and engaging with your partners, because I think partners, donors are much more interested and open to engaging beyond, in terms of talent and experience and skills. Um, are you having conversations with them about how, as a not-for-profit and as a large not-for-profit, can actually help them and engage with them and help them in terms of the voices of others? So, for example, if they're building a call center
Mhm.
tool for where there's an AI chat, where there's an AI even live when you're calling an agent, the AI is listening and the agent is getting the answer. Um, how is, for example, there, how can you actually bring those other needs to bear? Do you see an opportunity to be helpful in that way?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, we're seeing both the excitement and hesitation across the sector. And, I've been across Canada in various different conferences and the work that we're doing. And I see there's a woodworker on the call. We're doing a big, we've been doing this big Women in Skilled Trades project over the last 3 years. So we're having that conversation with folks. And there is an opportunity for larger nonprofits, as you mentioned, to really not just be leaders, but advocates and be able to build a community of organizations that tend to think that because I don't have capacity, because I don't have resources, I can't engage in the conversation and I can't engage in, getting my workforce ready in the AI, AI economy. And so, when we look at what Skills for Change has done, I think that's exactly where we need to go in terms of from conversation to implementation for us. So, Skills for Change, we developed an AI policy that was less about governance on paper. It was governance, as you mentioned, is very important, but it is really more about creating the shared foundation for how we engage with AI as an organization. And we recognized really early that if we didn't take a proactive approach, adoption would happen in silos, unevenly, without a clear lens on equity, ethics, impact. As you mentioned, people are still going to use it. So they're, how are they going to use it on their phones and there be the governance pieces around privacy and security, et cetera. And so taking that real step, and we grounded that policy in a few core principles, including responsible innovation and use, equity by design, privacy and compliance, and a human-centered decision-making process. And what that means to leverage AI as a tool that enhances efficiency and service delivery without replacing that human judgment. The goal was to empower staff with better insights, automation, while maintaining that accountability. And what's interesting is we embedded the privacy and compliance to strengthen the data governance and ensure that all AI use respects client confidentiality. That's another, critical piece to maintain and complies with Canadian privacy laws and ethical standards. So included in implementation of strict data classification ensures that we understand the tools, gives team members the knowledge and skills they need to be informed users of the tool, and creates the right guardrails and systems to prevent the digital mishaps. So the implementation piece was critically important, where we were intentional about making this change management process not just a policy rollout, because we all know how policy rollouts can be, the complex language and the fear that comes out of you cannot do this and you should not do this, and everything tends to be around the not, and instead of the what can we do and what do we have control over. We received positive feedback initially from staff saying that now that the organization has provided the clear, what we call black and white rules, they no longer have to second guess whether the tool they're using could get them in trouble, but the clarity significantly increased in trust and engagement. And so we scaffolded this policy by offering extensive training from the outset and introducing a 90-day amnesty period where staff could learn, experiment, get training, ask questions without fear of penalty of how they're using the technology. It created a safe environment for adoption, build confidence within the organization, and also allows for iteration. So, if you want to make a case, obviously the tools are one thing and the tools are going to keep changing. So therefore, the policy needs to adapt to what tools we're using. So we've developed and deployed our own extension that gently nudges our staff when they access unapproved sites. And if they want, they can make a case around why the unapproved sites are required for the organization, and we can go through that process. But essentially, what I really wanted to get down to is because, something that we have been speaking about across the country is Now that we've built this, how can others access it? Right? That's the bigger question is why do we need to reinvent what an AI policy looks like across the nonprofit sector? Where are the opportunities that you can then take this and build it for your own organization? And what I think it really has done is it real goal was creating an environment that once you get the buy-in and create the culture of AI, there's a more comfortability about training others in AI. And so that's the biggest piece that we're seeing at our organization. And I think where nonprofits such as Skills for Change have that opportunity to then be able to support and lead other organizations to develop and adopt those same policies and practices.
Yeah, thank you. There's so many things you covered here that that I could come back to, and thank you, Bernice, Krez, Emil, for engaging in the chat. Please, I encourage others to share your thoughts, your ideas, and yes, you're absolutely right, Emil. Yeah, serious AI. We've been using AI for a long time. If you're, if you use Netflix or Spotify. They're telling you what you might, what shows you might like to listen to or watch next. It's pervasive. It's everywhere. I would at this point maybe make the distinction between Gen AI
Mm,
AI because it's often used interchangeably. And
yes.
what's new in the last 3 or 4, I think ChatGPT was maybe 3 years ago.
Mhm.
What's new is the Gen AI now being accessible to everyone. All you need is the internet and a device. And it is that is the part that that anyone in any role and in life can use and probably is using. And it really allows you to create. It allows you to summarize. It helps you brainstorm. It helps you research and get data. AI, the broader AI that is Siri, although Siri is now a blend of both, but other things that we see is really around helping with decision making and has that sort of broader perspective. So if I were to speak about Gen AI first,
Mhm.
because I think from a policy point of view in organizations, that is the one that affects everyone. The
Mm,
developing AI tools and how you're going to use it internally, whether it's for developing your strategy or better serving your clients,
mhm.
is more contained, and there are more guardrails just built into the way you develop product. So on the Gen AI side, and just to get practical here, what I see, and of course I have more of my experience in the private sector and actually in government as well, on the public sector side, is being really clear on policy and support around Gen AI. Choose your tools. There are a lot of different, things out there that help you decide what they are. Sometimes they're tied to your office systems that you have already. Be clear on what they are and on your security and data side. And you spoke about culture, and that's a really, really important point. Deloitte does a human capital trends report every year, and the 2026 just came out about a month ago, and they talk about this concept of culture deficit. This is not a technology issue. This is, as you say, a people issue. Organizations tell me 20% technology, 80% people change management. And so, how are you building that culture of experimentation, learning? In fact, it's no different than what we've always needed, but now it's even more important where people can learn, where there's safety, but there's also a way to learn from the mistakes and to be able to move forward. One of the stats that's staggering is, and I don't remember the number, but a high proportion of employees fear telling their manager or their employer that they have been using AI.
Mm.
because they're worried. Is it going to take my job away? Is it going to suggest that that it's because I don't know? So bringing those fears and issues out into the open is also really, really important. And the way that organizations are finding that it's most successful is how leaders are using it. And we have leaders in the room, no doubt. Um, this isn't about everyone else. This is about us as leaders. And when you use it, be transparent about it. Talk about it at your meetings. Talk about it when you have your one-on-ones. Ask people also, did they use AI? How did they find it? How did they interrogate it on issues that were important? Um, and creating that mechanism to share. I love what you said about sharing across not-for-profits on the governance policies, and I'd love to continue that conversation with you after. But even as individuals,
Mhm.
do not think of this as a zero-sum game and hoard the information. This is the time for an abundance mindset, and particularly in not-for-profits, where ultimately you are mission driven. You are there to serve your constituency. So creating that culture and environment and the intrinsic rewards when people share and share their learnings is also really key to adoption. If I could take one question here, and I think the question came from it was in relation to I think Crest, your executives and the concerns. Fair. Again, this is not this is not uncommon, and there's no silver bullet, but having really strong fact base around benefits and risks, the benefits that you want to move on sooner than later, I suggest something around Gen AI, picking your tool, and then pick one use case that you really think has high potential, that has that has a few people in the organization involved. You've probably done a competitive landscape because everybody's integrating it, and I see the business you're in where I'm sure it is being used by competitors, but really being focused on here's what we can do and here's how we're going to mitigate the risks. And I understand that ROI is a conversation everywhere. And that's a tough one. And it's a tough one for smaller organizations because if you do this just as an efficiency play, you're actually not going to get the long-term benefits. Yes, there are efficiencies, but there's quality, there's growth, there are a whole bunch of different things that go along with that. And thanks again for all the folks that are engaging. And you're never too old to start to use it. I think we said that when Zoom calls came out in the pandemic and when digital came out. And for the person who said you were too old, I'm actually older than you, and I use it extensively.
Well, and I think that thank you for addressing that because, even in the programs that we're developing, it's really again about, if you are working in the trades or you're working in technology or whatever the sector you're in, again, using that principle. I love the principle of the 20% AI and 80% human skills. And so, we know that there are sectors like the automotive sector, for example, that are shifting, and there are aspects of work that are going to be AI generated and really move into the AI sector. But we are not at that stage right now, and we do have an opportunity to impact the conversation on why the 80% is not only needed today, but is going to be needed 5 years and 10 years from now. Right. And I think that that's where a lot of the fear does take place. And I know, Zabeen, I have a 6-year-old and a 10-year-old at home. And I'm already thinking about how this is going to impact their future. This is like nothing we've ever seen. I mean, when I was a kid, we didn't even have cell phones at that point, right? So to move from how we experienced education and training to what our kids and the future generation is going to be experiencing, absolutely, there's a lot of fear. But again, it's really about ensuring that we're part of that conversation to ensure that, we aren't getting left behind and that AI isn't moving forward without kind of understanding where the human potential is today and where it is 5 and 10 years from now. And I do want to get to particularly Ashwin, that says that around, really that paradox around how they can make AI work with those who replace, labor are supporting those that are displaced. And so, what do you see, Zabeen, around that piece where there are workers that are being displaced and where we can meet that gap?
Yeah, it's a very real issue that we have to be transparent about. And this is my perspective. And collectively, between employers, governments, higher ed, and education systems generally, and not-for-profits, as well as civil society, people who engage in issues like this, we need to address it in a thoughtful, systematic, um, heads-on way. And I don't think we are. I think this needs leadership from all the sectors to come together and to address it because our greatest asset as a country is our human potential. And humans have a lot of potential that can be unlocked, that can move into doing other things. We've seen this before in earlier industrial revolutions, but not at this scale and scope. It's happening everywhere. I come from banking, as you mentioned, and as people would know, and there were many rounds of different kinds of automation.
Mhm.
There was yeah, right from back to when the mainframes came in to digital, and when banking machines were introduced, there was a huge fear that branches are going to close, that there won't be branch staff. Well, branches have evolved.
Yeah.
Banks today have significantly more employees in doing different kinds of work. But even branches, they've become meeting places. They've become a place where humans come in. They've become a place where some branches use their space after hours for not-for-profits and for other good community events. But it has to be tackled that way. And I know that's macro. So if I bring it down to micro. Um, First of all, I think organizations need to be transparent with employees and say, okay, to some extent, we don't fully know,
Mm.
but what we do know is that human skills are
Mhm.
the enduring transferable skills. What I would say is that they were before as well people who have had what's deemed to be successful careers, it is because of those human skills. I started as a teller at RBC. I worked in the retail branches. I worked in operations. I worked in strategy. I worked in technology. I worked in credit cards. I didn't know those businesses when I transitioned. What I had was transferable skills. And at the same time, I did go to school. I got my MBA, but today, everybody needs that. Our kids need that even more, but we all need that. And so, what are organizations doing to make that more visible? Because they're hard, they're a bit intangible. How do I learn them? How do I assess them?
Mhm.
But the commitment to reskilling and upskilling, I think there's a strong business case for it. I also understand the reality. Not, it's going to take all the different players together, but it starts with the transparency. It starts with giving employees access to training. And as employees, again, the people that have had successful careers in the past are those that invest in themselves. Just as we invest in our health, organizations have benefits plans, but
Mhm.
unfortunately, they can't go to the gym for you. Um, and eating. They can educate you on good eating, but you have to still do it. And learning has to become lifelong. And the ideal for me is how do you make learning as an individual as something that's enjoyable, that you find motivating. And time is an issue, but I think we can all find half an hour a week to dedicate to our own learning, because it is about our future.
Absolutely. Thank you. And I can unpack so much of that, which will be here for the next 3 hours. But I did want to get to a question or just a comment, just shifting a little bit around, an individual in the chat speaking about being a senior HR business partner and spanning across Nestle, Deloitte, and other high-grown startups. So, we talk about the corporate sector and how quickly, it seemingly quickly, they're moving on AI adoption, as you mentioned, into the financial sector has been, there's been lots of technological advancements for years before kind of the Gen AI and AI tools started coming to about. But, how can the corporate sector then effectively engage how can the nonprofit sector engage corporate partners? So not just in funding, but actually a shared leadership in advancing responsible and equitable AI. And you come from that sector, so I would love to hear your perspective around where we can engage corporate companies in this work.
Yeah, I don't have an answer yet. But it is one, and we were chatting a couple of weeks ago, and I had actually been at a conference with not-for-profit leaders and philanthropists, and we were having this conversation around how, it's the corporate sector, it's also the tech sector,
Mm,
the on the sort of developer side, because the companies that are developing these products, because we have so much potential for responsible, good use of AI. Think about healthcare. I was just a couple of days ago on Metro Morning listening to, they were talking about AI contests that Trillium Health Partners had,
mhm.
and how they've developed a tool to better serve patients in the emergency room, and what took them 7 hours happens in a few minutes, and how they're going to be able to now use it across in many different parts of the hospital. But of course, we know, even reading diagnostics, MRIs, that you can see that AI can actually do a better job. But we have to then help radiologists who today read them to develop. They haven't really typically engaged with patients before. You
Right.
get the report. But now there's that opportunity to help them better understand, to help them uh, take action if they need to, but to really, provide much better patient care, so that human capabilities are required everywhere. But back to your question of what can we do? If people have thoughts in the audience, I would love to hear that. What I would leave you with is we need to do that. And
Hmm.
let's think about a systematic co-creation, collaborative way. Because at the end of the day, the majority of our corporate leaders want to do responsible AI, the vast majority. And so, how do we take that mindset and work on it in that way?
Thank you. And there's one question I do want to get to. I know we have a couple of other areas to explore, but Manali says, like, what are some of the non-negotiables that leaders and change makers need to keep in mind when it comes to AI and innovation? I love this question because, again, as you mentioned earlier, that, we need to be having these conversations regularly in our leadership tables and ensure that it is coming from the leadership that the values around AI adoption that is going to be passed on to the organization in such a way that it is building the culture from the, I don't love the kind of analogy of top down, but really it does need to come
Mhm.
from the top down. So what is it that leaders need to consider?
Yeah, the you're absolutely right. Leaders set the tone. Trust has become one of the most important aspects in business, in society, and for leaders, the and trust takes a long time to build and can be eroded and destroyed really, really quickly. So what I'm hearing from leaders, from whether it's CEOs or others, organizational leaders, is the importance of getting the balance between speed and trust, and it really has to be trust over speed, um, and the drive for yes, we do want to get return, absolutely, but not not at the expense of really having that high quality where it matters. So let me give you an example. If you're writing an email using Gen AI, an internal email, does it have to be perfect? No. In my head, I think, okay, this has to be a B quality.
Hmm.
But when you are if you are reviewing a client request, do you
Hmm.
need to understand it really clearly and make a really good match? Yes. So that's where what you get with AI is the possibility to actually provide a better outcome for them. But organizations need to understand that and encourage that, because I still see the over the sort of over indexing on the everything is going to be faster and more efficient, to being able to triage. It's a bit like triage in an emergency room, right? They look at it and they say, okay, this can wait, or this can be seen by the intern. This, we've got to get to the specialist right away. And I think that's a capacity for leaders to build, and ongoing communication. That is non-negotiable. We have to create the space for people to ask the difficult questions, while also understanding that change is inevitable. We want to manage how that change happens.
Yeah, and it's not easy work. Like sorry, I'm just getting a bit of feedback. Sorry. It's not easy work. It does take time. And when we talk about the balancing accountability and innovation, for example, we really need to look at, not just adopting tools because we're seeing something happen, but really understand how it's going to impact our organization. And so that again, that critical thinking needs to come from the leadership to say, why does this particular Gen AI or tool or AI policy, et cetera, why does it make sense for my organization? And I firmly believe that through that then comes the accountability around we're not just building this AI tool or developing this policy because someone else said to do so or because everyone else is doing it or because I saw it at a conference and I'm going to adopt it, but really why does it make sense for my organization to adopt, and how is it going to better the organization and better the people and make the people stronger in the delivery of service or product or et cetera.
Yeah, and it's new for leaders too. This is a whole new area. Um, so creating that culture and environment of we are learning together, we are co-creating, but it does require um, employees to play a role as well. There are leading organizations who, and they're public about it, who have said to their employees, we are moving to Gen AI adoption very quickly. It really works well for our business and our clients as well. Um, and we are going to provide you with skilling, with upskilling for other opportunities to do other things, but you also have a role to play. In terms of learning, building the skills. And I know this is not necessarily a popular point of view, but some of that has to be on our time. This is not just about the employer. This is about investing in ourselves. We don't expect the healthcare system, as I said earlier, to take care of our health. This is, we spend time on our financial planning. Our careers and jobs are really our biggest source of building our financial security. And so, there is that joint accountability, making things available. There are a lot of things in the public domain, helping people navigate, helping people find them, um, and finding also fun ways for people to learn. Some organizations do the learning with their families, or with their kids, or they make they make it so that the time that people are spending still entails their family. But I do think, given we all have a role to play in the ambition for the Canada we're building. And so, that's my view on the learning. I do also want to pick up on a comment there about the inequities, and I think, David, it was you that, shows the difference in unemployment rates for newcomers and for Black youth. Yeah, this is where we need to really double down, because everybody deserves to have opportunities to unlock their potential. And we as a country need to do that. So we can't solve that here. But I think that's where we started, because we're coming, I think, close to the end, Sampada, which is, how do we actually use AI to help us reduce those inequities? Because now we have different ways of helping people unlock potential.
Thank you. And as you mentioned, we do have just a couple of minutes, and I will say something at the end regarding Bernice's message last in the chat. But I want to know from you, Zabeen, if we get this right, if nonprofits, corporate leaders, policymakers align, what does an inclusive AI-enabled future of work actually look like? Loaded question for you, but
Okay, where's my crystal ball? Um, a few points I would say. One is, and I don't like this term higher value work, because all work is valued, but more interesting work, where some of the tasks that are mundane and repetitive are taken away. So if I'm dreaming, we've said this on previous rounds of automation, it hasn't happened. Maybe we will finally be able to work fewer hours, with some of this taken away. And we have an opportunity to increase inclusion, however, only if we pay attention to those who are already not included or excluded, marginalized, by taking special measures to ensure that they are a part of this potential. And that's the promise, I think, that many of us are really looking for. But the leadership aspect, for the leaders in the not-for-profit sector, and others that are on this table, we have to come together across those sectors. And I think we need to see governments, because this is multiple government levels who play a role, prioritize this.
And so, with that, before I, say what Skills for Change and you are doing to encourage organizations to be, leading that conversation, what action would you encourage organizations to take in the next 3 to 6 months, even to ensure they're part of shaping an equitable AI future?
Develop your policies and frameworks, simple as they are, and freedom within that framework, so that you're clear, people have direction and can align with it. Um, Pick a Gen AI tool, make sure everybody is using it legitimately as opposed to on their own devices, and pick one use case that you want to do collectively, where a large number of people can participate, whether it's around scheduling, whether it's an HR process, whether, there are many different things that, so people can learn, see the value, build a culture of sharing. And culture is really a huge lever here, as we move forward. So no, there's no silver bullet. So I know I listed a few things, but for me, that's a 3 to 6 month doable time
hmm
frame.
Absolutely. And would like to just to say that over the next couple of weeks, folks, please do engage, us online and connect with Skills for Change and connect with Zabeen and myself on LinkedIn and other platforms, as we do have, a project that we'll be launching very shortly with Zabeen and the support of Zabeen to really address what you're saying, Bernice, around how do we actually look at training and courses for the nonprofit sector in particular and sector leaders to be able to do that knowledge sharing and be able to embed not only the AI training and tools, but really embed that into the human potential and how we use it as humans and how we use it using thinking skills and collaboration. So I just want to encourage folks to keep attuned to what's happening with our organization and with this work, but also that please engage with us as we do. As I mentioned, this is not just something that we talk about in this conversation, but we have built an AI policy that can be adopted with other organizations, and really then adopted is the key word, right? How do you take what a policy has been developed and apply it to your own organization? So I do encourage you to reach out to us to learn more about that. But on that note, it is 12 o'clock. We could have spoken for hours. I'm sure we could have had this conversation and explored so many different areas. I would love to have that opportunity to do that with you in future, Zabeen, but I do want to very sincerely and thank you for joining me today and at least starting this conversation, and how do we move towards a more responsible and equitable workforce that is AI driven. So I do want to thank you for your time and all of your incredible insights today.
Thank you for having me. It was a fun conversation.
Thank you. Take care, and we'll see you soon, folks. Bye.